much in the middle of the desert over here, heading to Vegas. It's nice. This is literally like really in the middle of nowhere. Getting some gas, like the gas is expensive, so you can tell that you're in the middle of nowhere. And got about an hour to go to Vegas. Super excited to meet the guys over there and do some driving. It's always crazy in Vegas. Like you're rolling through the desert and then all of a sudden in the distance you see the city coming up. Like an oasis of light. It's really crazy.
Trying to finish up. We just pulled the motor to go back through it.
So is it 2J or what is it?
Yeah, 2J.
Cool. Mustang Vert. Chelsea must be proud. They're built like tanks, these things. Like it's crazy how strong they are.
This is actually the first rental car we ever bought.
Oh really?
This is the start of the
oh, this actually was a rental car.
Yeah, the guy got into it with a hooker or something like that. She keyed the car and like cut the top and.
What?
Yeah, insurance totaled it out. So.
Man. And you got a Corvette over here.
Yeah, that's like a C8, the new Corvettes. They're just different, a few different things. Do some stuff we're building for customers mostly. 2JZ, LSX, so it's like a 454, LS7 based. This is actually a big block boat motor. That's just a GM53, like powder coat and everything. It's for my Impala.
Oh man.
So we're doing like a vintage, like kind of build. This is, I think this one's another build motor. This is I think this is the big motor, yeah. So it's like a 432 cubic inch Ford.
Oh man.
So it's got CID cylinder heads on it. This goes in a Pro 4 unlimited class truck. So it's about 930 horsepower to the wheels, I believe.
Whoa.
Naturally aspirated.
Nice man.
This
This
is like an RB head. We're going like an RB30 for a guy.
You can always tell with the little. There's a telltale sign on the RBs.
An RB30 with a.
They got kind of good
head.
bore spacing. I always like the bore spacing on the RBs. Like it's kind of nice. If you compare it to the BMW heads, like that's like one of the BMW heads are really good with the flow, but like they don't have much space between all the holes in the head. Cool, man.
We always got like a variety of things we're building on. We're trying to like narrow down and focus a little bit more on different things, but you know, like it's just.
Oh yeah.
We just like cars, man, and engines, and you know sometimes you just can't say no. So we just. That's our soda blasting cabinet. So pretty much much exclusively, like cylinder heads, blocks, things like that. We soda blast everything.
Right, because you don't want to have like sand and shit.
We don't want to have to deal with sand, things like that. We have ultrasonic, so that's where like our finish cleaning happens. So we can get all like blind holes, things of that nature, and
Super
then
nice.
large, small ultrasonics depending on the type of parts. Just regular, you know, part jet washer,
Hot tank.
burn off oven if you know, like for cast iron.
Yeah, if you need
it's
to
really
get.
bad.
Yeah.
We have just standard lathe mill crankshaft polisher. I actually have a new 2-axis CNC valve seat machine. I just haven't set it up yet. But yeah, this is for like
Don't tip that over.
yeah. That thing is sick. I wish I had that thing running to show you. That thing is so sick.
Oh yeah.
I gotta get this thing hooked up and running.
There's like so few people that have these things.
Yeah, these things are insane, man.
Yeah.
It is the coolest machine to see in action. So like we're just been busy, man, trying to.
I love
Get
this
around
place.
this.
It's really nice, man. I like it. I didn't know you did all the engine work as well and all that stuff,
So
man.
we do all machine work in house. Everything from. We do almost everything. We've got like polishers for like rotating assemblies, guide equipment, rod hones. We just keep two because it's just easier to have one set up for big end and one end for small end.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's pretty often we see rods that just aren't as concentric as we
Oh
like them
man,
to be.
if you check them, it's fucking scary.
Obviously, wrist pins and pistons we do. Oh fuck! It's crazy how much we have to do those. They're standard like a line hone.
What would you say is like a good brand for rods? Which is the ones that are mostly like true? If you get them.
Sometimes it can be hit or miss. To be honest with you, like we use with Manly stuff a lot.
Oh yeah.
They do a lot of their own sizing and like quality control here in the U.S.
Oh, that's good.
So like it's kind of like the best quality of like the stuff that comes from overseas, and obviously like the CP
Carrillo is this all American, right? They do everything.
Yeah, everything. They're forged here in the United States. Everything. There's a lot of like just fantastic brands. Powder. That everything comes like perfect.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about things like that. Cali's.
Okay, I have Kelly's in my car. Yeah.
There's a lot of Lunati we use. Spot on. But obviously, like
Lunati's good. Yeah.
Someone's making like a piston, and then someone's making a rod, so like that's where like wrist pin sizing is like really important. So that's a very common thing. But every once in a while, it's like we get customers in here, and not to say that's bad or doesn't work, but they'll bring us like Eagle or something, something along those lines, and it's pretty much a guarantee that we have to go back through and size them. I think we just did one last week where it was like they were like K1 or something. The guy, so another shop had spec'd out and like never finished this guy's motor. It was a 2J, and he wound up having to. We had to resize the big end on those as well.
Yeah.
So we get those sometimes. It sucks, man, but. Just a different level for cutting multi-angle stuff. We're still going to use this for a standard.
But you could basically make anything you want with that thing. Like that's like crazy. Like people really don't realize the potential of those things.
From a seat profile, and there's, I think what a lot of people like about it is there's power there.
Yeah.
So RA finishes, surface finishes are super critical.
Yeah.
And with that, you can achieve ridiculous. I haven't actually metered anything because we haven't cut anything with it yet, but like they're telling me I can get 14 to 19 RA finishes on a seat, which is absolutely absurd.
Yep.
I mean, it's like literally a mirror. So there is power to be had there too.
Yeah.
And I have a lot more control over the profile, the height, things like that. I could do things a lot more precisely.
Because you've seen, you helped our Canadian friend out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it was like a typical story where like it's a lot of monkey see as monkey do, especially with 2Js, because like on Drift Week, there's a lot of guys that are like, oh, we lost that head or the head gas, let's put this head on that car. And nobody really knows what they're doing, and it gets machined.
I think the problem is like people rely on machine shops, and just it's a sad to say, but not all machine shops are good.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people don't like that kind of stuff just because it's very difficult to do things like overhead cam motors and stuff. They take a lot more time than V8 stuff, and they're tedious.
And it's probably a lot of road cars. So most machine shops, like 99.9% of their clientele is road cars. And it doesn't even, if you have like a fucking Jeep 4-liter.
Machine shops get stuck in that where they're afraid to focus solely on the performance stuff, and they go and they focus on taking the easy jobs, the general automotive stuff, and then they get stuck in it. And in order to make money at it, they have to turn the stuff over faster and cut corners. And it works. But then those same methods become habit forming.
For sure.
And then a performance engine comes in, they treat it the exact same way.
Because you can't you can't have your staff wear a different hat, like wear like the performance machining hat on Monday.
Like tipping valves in general automotive is like normal practice. And to be honest with you, it's very common practice in performance motors. When we build a cylinder head, no valves get tipped. We never tip valves because the reality is if something happens to that cylinder head and the valves are good, you want to use them in something else. We didn't know where we're at.
Exactly.
You don't know how much the person cut off it previously.
Exactly.
And so that's the problem is
I really don't like that at all. And also like it's probably not meant to do that. Like the material of the valves, it's not meant for that.
There are like there's a general rule of thumb. It's usually about 8/1000ths of where you could cut material off a valve because they're hardened, right?
Yeah.
And that means the exterior of it's hardened, right? But if you cut through those layers,
but
eventually you get into softer
material. That's exactly what I mean. So that's like it's never meant to. Yeah. So
and you never. I think the biggest problem is builders, right? Engine builders, right? Nothing against engine builders, but like I feel like 9 times out of 10, it's never the builder, it's always the machinist, but the last guy to touch the motor always gets the blame.
For sure, yeah.
And the thing is like the equipment. So you charge someone to build their motor, and then you take their stuff to a machine shop. As you're machining things, we have to measure everything over and over and over again. So for someone to take a motor that I machined as a builder, and then to go back through and remeasure it, is ridiculous, right? It's a lot of extra time when everything should already be measured.
Because you've
right?
done it, yeah.
Cylinder heads even. Typically, most builders do not assemble the cylinder heads. They specify, and the machine shop does that because they have the equipment and the tools.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it's tough. And a lot of times builders can get bad raps and stuff like that from machine shops because it's very expensive. One of these gauges could be, $3,500. I think just like this little guy here was like $2,800, $3,000 for a small gauge, and all this thing can do is read valve guides.
Yeah.
So we have piston height, wrist pin fixtures. I mean, everything you could think of. This is valve guides. Every single gauge in here. I think a bore gauge is maybe about $3,500.
Yeah.
Plus $2,500 for a setting fixture.
Yeah.
It's like, and then I have one for bores, and then I have one for mains.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot for a builder, someone doing assembly work to have.
Yeah, you need to do hundreds of motors a year. Yeah.
Exactly. You have to trust your machinist, and then something slips through the crack. Like, for example, Jesse, he just swore that, no, my valves aren't tipped. This isn't the problem.
Yeah.
Because his builder said that he would never do that. Because his builder would never do that.
Yeah.
But the machine shop did.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So and that's the problem.
It's assumption.
Exactly. And sometimes you don't have as much control over it. So it's tough, man. Because at the same time, like we try to do as little assembly work as possible because we try to keep our machines running. And we do here and there, for people, like it depends on the situation. We do some assembly work. But like I said, you just have to find people you can trust. And it's very challenging. Yeah. I mean, his valves were cut so far down.
It's crazy.
That the bucket couldn't make contact with the valve anymore. The bucket was making contact with the retainer before it made contact with the valve. And
but what you often obviously see in Europe with the 2J is that people, like, they lose a head gasket. So they send out the cylinder head, and like the whole fucking thing, as dirty as it comes out of the motor, it goes to the machine shop, and the dudes want to keep the same valve clearance. So they do the seats, and they'll do the same. They'll basically take the same material off the top, so that you don't have to do valve clearances, basically. But I'm like, I fucking hate that. Exactly. Like, just don't touch it, and we'll do the valve clearances again. It's
very common.
It's so lazy.
I get people all the time that and sometimes people don't know any better. A common thing that comes in is I had an issue with this with a customer, and I hope he made it to the event tomorrow. Really cool kid, man, but he was upset because he measured his valve stem heights and they were like 8 thousandths too high.
Yeah.
But he brought us a cylinder head and wanted standard size valves.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how can you expect me to go back through and cut this seat?
Yeah.
And not shift the valve into the head?
Yeah.
I have no choice. So we try to push everybody into oversized valves.
Yeah.
If we can, right?
Yeah.
Like, it just makes things so much easier.
Yeah. Because you have like
isn't cheap. That's not an easy job to do. So we try not to replace seats if we can help it. Like, let's cut the opening larger, unless it's an application that needs seats.
Yeah.
So we try to push people in the right direction, but sometimes people, they get their own advice from the internet or whatever it is,
from 10 different people,
and they just know better, and then when it doesn't work out, and it's not
they already have it, so they'll like, I already have the valve, so
and then they want us to tip the valves, and it's like, but but this isn't right. You know, like, just you have to re-shim this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. Like, we did guides, we did valves. Like, you got to re-shim this.
Of course.
Is it ideal? No. If this was a really high performance, like a very high horsepower motor, I would have told you no.
Yeah.
But it was like a stockish SR.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're going to be okay. Like, so there are areas where, like, there's some wiggle room to a certain extent. But that's only if a customer's really pushy that they want something to be made work. But realistically, most of the time we turn down that kind of work.
Yeah. But it's very difficult with engine work and head work and machining work that you never hear anybody say it's reasonable. You always hear people say, the guy who did this head is like the best in the world. He does heads for NASCAR. Like, I never heard somebody say, yeah, it's okay. And if you do cages, so we do a lot of cages and a lot of fabrication, and sometimes I see fabrication made by shops. I'm like, that's okay. It's not great. It's not bad. It's okay. You never hear that from machine shops. Everybody always says, I'm like, oh, is the motor built? Yeah, the motor's built. It's done by this guy up in LA and he's like the best, or like up in there in Tennessee and he's the best. Like, but there's so many levels of quality in machine shops and people don't seem to realize that. So they'll accept that there's levels in paint jobs. They're like, oh, this car is painted okay, but it's like nice. It's like a 10-foot paint job. But nobody's ever going to say, oh, it's reasonable machining just for a road car. Yeah. Everybody always thinks that their machinist and their builder is the best. Like, and did you ever hear anybody say, oh, my builder he's okay, you know?
Everything's the best.
Everything's
right?
the best.
Well,
everything
works, right?
Yeah, but they can't be. Just like every paint coat, if you put 10 fucking Impalas in a row, there's going to be 10 different qualities of paint job, and one's going to be really good and one's going to be average. And people really think that as soon as you have a machine and you skim ahead, that is perfect. And if you do a bunch of valve seats, that is good. But like the way you talk about it, it makes so much sense. And this thing, like, it's like about thinking out of the box, you know. That's the whole thing. Like, what are you working with and what are you assuming? And the assumptions is always like, I had this really dumb thing with a motor that I was working on with the guys in Aruba, and they thought it was seized. And we were like pulling the main caps and everything. We're like, how the hell is that possible? And we're looking, and it turns out that the flywheel bolt, somebody pulled the flywheel off and put the bolts back in. And the bolts were, you know,
they were hitting the main cap.
They were hitting the fucking the outside of the motor, like, so the crank couldn't move. And we're like, how the hell? So it's like all those little assumptions, and it's like I had it so many times that people, you know, it's always like the assumptions that get you, and you're like, oh, that's going to be fine, and that's good, and that guy knows what he's doing, so it can't be the valve seats because that guy is like, he did an FD motor, so he knows how to do valve seats. And but you never know what people have been like. I've got people that tell me, oh, can you just, I don't have money to skim the head, can you just put copper stuff on it? I'm like, no, because somebody's going to pull that motor apart when it fails on the track, and they're going to say, who did that motor? And you're going to say, oh, Wout did that motor. And they're going to say, oh, Wout doesn't skim heads. Although that guy asked me not to skim the head because I'm tight on money, can you help me out? So we don't do that, you know.
I definitely see where like people like cut corners to create efficiencies and things like that. And obviously I see the craziest shit sometimes, because when you physically are a machine shop,
yeah,
you get the stuff where like people went to another machine shop.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, oh, I'm not too sure.
Oh yeah.
And about this, and then I have to check it, and then I have to give them the bad news. Like, you went to someone because they were half the price or a little bit cheaper, and they ruined your shit. Like, I'm sorry. Yeah. You know, so we deal with that. I mean, the thing is like, as long as you give a shit, this is actually like, it looks very complex and the machines look very intimidating. It's the recipe for us is very, very simple. If I touch it, it has to be machined within the window of whatever the manufacturer recommends. So if we're talking about the surface finish of a cylinder head, right? That surface job on that cylinder head needs to meet the RA specs of the head gasket manufacturer and what they request, right? Yeah. So otherwise I did a bad job. Yeah. But people don't check those things.
They don't even know what it is.
Have a profilometer. Yeah. Like, you know, like that isn't a very expensive tool. Yeah. You know, but we have those things, you know, we have to have everything. We just got a new ultrasonic checker, things like that. So we check thicknesses of things before we cut them now, because we've had issues. So we just keep making improvements.
But most people won't even know that there's a difference in that surface. So they'll be like, it's machined, you know, or it's skimmed. I'm like, yeah, but what? Like, there's a huge difference in there.
You know how much too. Like, sometimes we want to take the bare minimum because this affects the piston deck height, things like that. You know, so that's why we have a machine that could take tenths of thousands out on the surface. If it's a job where we know we have a lot of room, then we go to this machine, which is a little bit more efficient, and we take out faster, 1,000 at a time. So we have different options for different things. Or we can trick the thing different ways to achieve the same result. Right. In some ways, they're more efficient than others. It just depends on the type of motor. But if we assemble a motor, then I have to spec out the parts, and they have to be, you know, the manufacturer has to stand behind whatever it is that we're doing. Yeah. And that's a big problem that I have with people, where I have people come in and they say, look, I got these stainless valves. Well, how the fuck did you get stainless exhaust valves for a 2JZ? And it's just like, well, they said this would work. This person said this, and I'm like, I can't install them because I've installed them before and they melt. They heat. You have to have Inconel exhaust valves into it. It's too much heat.
Yeah.
And it's just like, but there's shit out there that doesn't work, and it's for sale. It's readily available to everybody. And if you're not experienced, how do you know the difference?
Yeah.
And it's very challenging sometimes, and that's one of the big hardest things to overcome, especially like with me, like and having a background of drifting and dealing with a lot of drifters and things like that. You know, a lot of these people, it's foreign territory to start going into built motors. They definitely feel like it's a part of the progression, but they're new to it and they don't realize that they have to look out for certain things.
Yeah.
I get this all the time. We're like rods. It's like, okay, well, you know, Manley's website says this rod is rated for 900 horsepower, and I'm like, okay. The thing is if you read that figure and you're like, okay, this is what it's rated for, it's going to work. But if you actually call them, they're going to tell you that that's at the crank. So
Right.
you're talking about 900 wheel horsepower. They're talking about crank horsepower.
Yeah.
There's two different things, right? Now, if you leave their website and you go into their catalog, there's a big asterisk at the bottom, and it says, if you're doing circle track, now, which is probably one of the closer things that would be understandable, because let's be realistic here, a lot of people that are, especially ones that are focused on more domestic related stuff, they're not too familiar with what drifting is, right?
Yeah.
But probably one of the closest relatable things for them is
Because
circle
you're on
track.
RPM and
So now the same connecting rod is now only rated for 600 horsepower.
yeah, exactly.
So the problem is if I have to stand behind what I'm doing, I want to make sure that the manufacturer of the parts that I put into your motor will stand behind me.
Yeah.
Right? Because obviously if a part breaks, I don't want to pay to fix it.
No.
I will, and I have to all the time because sometimes the manufacturers don't want to stand behind me.
Yeah.
And they always seem to find a way to blame me no matter what.
Yeah.
But at least maybe it gives me it helps me sleep at night thinking that they're going to help me
Yeah.
with stuff. But there are manufacturers that will total seal piston rings. We've had some experiences with them where they were like, yeah, absolutely, we'll pay for all the machine work to fix it.
Yeah.
If you do everything this way and everything meets this, and then we'll even pay for your labor to repair it.
Yeah, like give me an example of a shop that does that, like which because I think that's really good. Like
Total Seal.
Yeah.
So like,
Total Seal,
if I purchase rings from piston rings for Total Seal, they're our favorite piston ring manufacturer to work with. A lot of pistons from like J&E, Manley, things that can be ordered with Total Seal or even come with Total Seal top rings out of the packaging. And so we try to use their rings as much as we can.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. If I have a failure and they say, this is the ring, this is going to work, this is the crosshatch angle, this is everything that you need to do to accomplish this and make this ring work. And as long as we achieve all of that, if there's a failure, a ring breaks, if there's just blow by in general and nothing breaks, they'll give me another set of rings and they'll pay all the labor for me to fix that.
That's really then you're standing.
And that's
behind
how
your
much they
product.
believe in their products. So there are companies out there that truly believe and stand behind their products.
Oh, that's really good to hear. Yeah.
And that's important that you work with people like that. You know, like we just had one where we had to call them, and we had a motor that had some blow by, and it was a very unfortunate situation. It was a new platform to us. It was a V6 and a Janetta. So in Europe, you guys have, that's where they're from, right?
Yeah, they're from
So
Europe.
the turnaround times with everything going on, it wasn't possible for him to get a refresh motor from Janetta. It's like, hey, can we just figure this out? Absolutely. We have to recreate the pistons. I get the pistons from the manufacturer. You pull out the card, it says 45-degree crosshatch angle. I should have probably done a little bit more research and maybe figured out what Ford recommended. But we went with the piston manufacturer and it backfired on us. And the rings aligned. And once they align and oil starts to pass through, you can't get them to spin again. They just stop spinning.
That's what it is,
Dead in their tracks.
Yeah.
So the answer is to go back to the crosshatch angle that came from the factory, which was closer to about 37 degrees. And Total Seal worked with us on this whole thing. And they can't stand behind that because we went by the ring manufacturer.
Yeah,
and we used that piston manufacturer's ring pack, and we went by their specifications, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So now we're working with Total Seal. The rings are going to be gapless to get rid of that problem, to alleviate some of that. And then we're going to go back and we're going to take care of it for the customer.
Yeah. Well, that's good practice.
You know,
but
so I
it's
mean, sometimes we're not exempt from failure or issues, right?
But
Like,
there's so many small things that could go wrong with a motor, and that's one of the reasons why it's not. So we build cars, but I typically don't build motors because I think you need to have a healthy profit margin on it, especially because things can go wrong. So if you build 50 motors a year, there's going to be 1 or 2 that are going to have a problem. So if you're building it with like 10% profit, you won't be able to keep that up. So I'm like, I'm not even touching it. We'll do transmissions, we'll do rear ends, we'll all of that, but I'm not going to build a motor because all the million things that can go wrong, I don't see any value in that. And like we went through a couple machine shops, and it's like also, like you said, it's like a little bit hit and miss. So some of them are, it's like people have an off day, or they'll have like an apprentice and they're like, oh, I got to get a doctor's appointment. Apprentice can finish that crosshatch and they fuck up. And like, if you would have a camera on those things like 24/7, that's just how things work, you know. And they're just like 16-year-old apprentices, like, oh yeah, I need to get these points for this and that learning module from like my education, and I need to do a crosshatch by myself. And like the shop owner who's like 65, he's like, whatever, I need to get home. And that's how shit happens. And it's your racing motor, it's your motor, and you're going to be like, wow.
We've had our fair share of failures and things like that, or mistakes that have happened from apprentices and things like that.
Yeah,
and,
it happens.
But those things don't leave the door. We catch them here, you know. We have our own quality.
Yeah, but that's the whole thing.
We're willing to, you know, we have to. It's part of the deal. We can't. One individual can't come in here and do everything, but one individual can stop and check, make sure crosshatch angles are correct, and things like take measurements before they leave, do final quality control and inspections before the stuff leaves. So we could mitigate most of the issues. Obviously, like when I talk about like having a failure on a recent motor we built, it was a new platform and the customer knew that this is not something that we're familiar with. And you know, we worked with him because I mean he's basically paying us to learn. And but he didn't have any choice. And
but it's like a very open communication, and like that's
100%.
That's the key of it. Like,
And I mean, we also, you know, like I can't. We're really excited to see that because he also took that motor out and he set the lap record at Spring Mountain Raceway, which is
man, they're good cars. They're like we always say, like they get lighter with every lap because stuff falls off because they're like kind of like an old Lotus, like you're driving with. They're so fragile.
Cars.
Like it's, but they're cool. I don't think many people know them, but. Yeah, it's cool. Well, thanks a lot for all the education, man.
Absolutely.
This is, and like if somebody tells it, like it makes it so obvious, and I'm always like a little blown away that not everybody does it, you know, because I think that the general public thinks that every machine shop works this way, and every machine shop, because it makes so much sense. You're saying like, hey, you know, it's gonna, like a stone's gonna follow the path of least resistance, and you're not really line boring it. You're basically pushing your stone through like an orifice that's you know
that machine was never, like, the thing is billet main caps weren't a thing when that machine was invented.
That's the whole thing.
And the machine hasn't changed in 50 years.
And it wasn't like with normal cast mains it would be fine, and you know that's another assumption. People are like, oh, billet mains is better, and then they take it to a machine shop that maybe has never done it, and they're like, oh, what's this? And like, oh, they're really good, you know.
I think people misunderstand. They think it's a line hone. And it's actually in a line. So I mean, it's designed to take small cuts, small increments out, and help align and straighten mains. Not cut a new opening.
Exactly. That's the whole thing.
It's not what the machine was created for. But like I said, you have things where, like, let's just say for V8s are a great example where you can get away with it because now you take a feeler gauge and you align your.
It doesn't really matter. Sometimes I see like older, like Mexican small blocks and stuff, and you're like, man, I can even tell by eye that the fucking cam, even the fucking cam position is like in a whole different spot. Like, it's crazy.
And the thing is, a lot of these guys are really good, man. They're just working with what they have, you know? And I'm fortunate enough that I'm in a situation with my life that I can afford to have these things and buy these things. And that doesn't make me a better machinist than someone else. You know what I'm saying? And the right guy with the manual equipment. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule, man. I get stuff comes in from other machine shops in town where they use, and all they have is, you know, adjustable like cutters for cutting valve seats, and they do them by hand with a drill. You know, it's like, it's impossible. You need to have the weight of the machine. To take the chatter and stuff out of that cutting bit to make things concentric. So there's certain things you can and can't do. You have to have a certain level of machinery. But the reality is once you have that certain level of machinery, even if it's just a manual machine, a basic hone, a 50-year-old piece of equipment, you can do great work and you can be well within or better than the run out that's allowable from the factory. And you know, you have engines from the factory go 100, 200, 300,000 miles, right?
Yeah.
So it's not to say that you can't achieve results that are race winning results without this.
Yeah.
But you have to be a quality machinist. You have to be on your game all the time to make this stuff right.
So you're basically making it easy on yourself.
And it's not to say that we can't fuck it up with this.
Yeah.
Because
But this is a little
we
like
definitely
easier.
could.
Yeah.
But it's really hard. I mean, like I said, I don't think a block has left here 2/10 run out. I can't think of a time where we've ever mic'd a block and it's been more than a tenth.
Oh, great, man. Well, thanks for the explanation. It
Absolutely.
speaks volumes, man. Really nice. I'll put a little explanation in the video what all these things are, because a lot of you guys may see it for the first time. But yeah, this is what you want to. This is what you want to do.